The House Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation will come to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Representative Puri?
Here.
Representative Morgan?
Here.
Representative Hood? Representative Steklov? Representative Skaggs?
Here.
Representative Steele?
Here.
Representative Borton?
Here.
Sir, you have 5 of 7 members. You have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Representative Morgan moves to approve the minutes from the subcommittee, Transportation Subcommittee meeting from last week on February 21st. Without objection, those minutes are approved. All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for your flexibility on today's kind of unique schedule. I look forward to the testimony today. We're going to be diving in to infrastructure spending, kind of narrowing in a little bit on the road funding conversation. And as we've mentioned over the last couple of weeks, just starting to explore the conversation of expanding sources of revenue and finding ways to help with infrastructure spending. And so I'm excited about our speakers today. Just to kind of get right into it, our first speaker is going to be Lance Binoniemi. Hopefully I got that correctly. Vice President in Government Affairs of the Michigan Department, from MITA. And so whenever you're ready, Lance, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it, and great job on the name. Appreciate the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Lance Binoniemi. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association, or more commonly known as MITA. MITA represents nearly 600 companies that build our roads, bridges, underground water and sewers, utilities, dams, all types of infrastructure in every corner of our state. We want to talk a little bit today about road funding and where we're headed into the future. This first graph you'll see is what we're seeing as pavement condition projections, moving into 2032. As you can see, there is a sharp decline in the pavement condition projections moving past where we're at in 2024. I think most notably, you'll see in 2028, we reach less than 50% of good and fair condition roads on our trunk line system. And we'll get into why we rate our roads in good and fair and poor condition and why it's important to invest when they're in good and fair rather than waiting until they're in poor. Another example of our poor infrastructure, in 2023, the American Society of Civil Engineers Infrastructure Report Card came out, and to put it blankly, Timmy's grounded. We have grades in overall grade of C-. Our roads are graded at a D, bridges at a D+, drinking water and stormwater in the D category as well. I know if I came home with this report card, I'd get grounded. And the rest of the state should be really worried about this. It's not hard to see why. This chart shows the average annual real per capita capital outlay from 2000 to 2021, broken down by every state. I know it's hard to see. It's a little easier on your handout. But the green line represents Michigan. We ranked 47th in that 20-year period of overall spending amongst all states. As you can see, the red line represents the national average. Clearly, we are underinvesting in all of our infrastructure and have for decades. The future does not look any better. These are projected revenue graphs if the state does nothing to increase revenues moving into 2027. We are calling it a sharp revenue cliff, and that's exactly what we will be seeing in the next 3 to 4 years once some of our short-term investments run out. For a little bit of background, how do we pay for our roads and bridges throughout the country? They're typically paid through user fees. There's a federal gas tax of 18.4 cents that was last increased in 1993. There's a state gas tax that's now 30 cents per gallon in Michigan, and we have registration fees that are based off the value of a vehicle. A lot of states do use toll roads. We do not in Michigan. Our biggest public policy problem in road funding is our sales tax on motor fuel. Michigan is one of about 5 states who assesses sales tax on their motor fuel. Very little of that revenue goes to transportation. In fact, of the $1.1 billion that raises, only $50 million actually goes into roads and bridges. So the last road funding package that we saw come through the legislature was in 2015. And as Governor Snyder signed that bill, he said it was a good down payment. He knew it was not the solution to our long-term sustainable road funding problem. But we increased the gas tax by 7.3 cents, which was indexed, which was very, very smart of the legislature back there. That started in 2017. Increased registration fees 20%, and then for the first time ever, dedicated general fund revenues to transportation, a full $600 million by 2020, 2021, and moving forward. We also increased registration fee increases for hybrid and electric vehicles of $50 and $140. And this package raised about $1.2 billion annually every year moving forward from 2020. Unfortunately, we needed $1.4 billion starting in 2010. But the legislature took 10 years to finally fully enact a $1.2 billion problem. During that period, losing $12 billion in available revenue that we could have had the legislature acted when they knew they needed that money. So moving forward, not to try to, as the governor knew that this was just a down payment, started another infrastructure commission, the 21st Century Infrastructure Commission, a very lengthy report that showed that the state needed to raise an additional $2.2 billion more annually for the next 20 years to make our transportation network in 90% good and fair condition, which is the benchmark that the state of Michigan has set. Since those revenues, what has been the response of us needing $2.2 billion? There have been some significant short-term investments, and this is why we are seeing so much construction going on our highways right now. Congress passed the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Those investments last through 2026. The governor's Rebuilding Michigan bonding program is a 4-year bonding program that is investing $3.5 billion into our state highway system. But where are the revenues from 2027 and beyond? We are in a road funding crisis, and the state needs a long-term, equitable, and sustainable road funding solution. A little bit deeper dive on the IIJA. And the reason why I do this is because when the IIJA was passed and some of the projects were laid out, we saw a lot of media reports about how great the program was. It's the most the feds have ever invested in the highway network. That is absolutely true. It did not solve our problem. And we did not want the public or the media to think that we have solved our problem with these short-term investments. So what does it actually mean in overall investments? We are receiving about $330 million in additional funding from the feds for that 5-year period. Again, we need $3.9 billion more annually in our roads to bring them up to 90% condition. So $336 million is part of that, but certainly isn't the full $3.9 billion. Now, Chairman Puri and I met a long time ago, one of our first meetings, and he asked if we could have a projection chart that suggested if we invested $1 billion into the system or $2 billion into the system. And so we asked MDOT to put this chart together, and it shows what it would take for, again, $1 billion, which is the yellow line, $1.5 billion, which is that orange line, and then the green line is a $2 billion extra annual investment. And I want to make sure everyone's clear, this is on the MDOT system only. So this only represents 39% of the total investment that would need. So what does that mean? If we raise $1 billion for MDOT, the total package would have to the total investment would have to be $2.56 billion overall to make sure that the locals are getting that 39%, MDOT's getting that 39%, and cities and villages are getting the 22%. But you can see, and MDOT does a really good job, and our Asset Management Council does a really good job of projecting future pavement conditions based on the investment levels. They've been spot on for the 12 years that I've been at MITA. Why do we care about good, fair, and poor conditioned roads? You can spend $1 on a good and fair conditioned roads to save $6 to $14 in a reconstruction on a poor conditioned road. What's happening now is we are trying to keep these roads in good and fair condition, but we don't have the resources to do so, and they're falling into needing complete reconstructs, which are costly, extremely expensive. And so this next chart kind of gives you a little bit of a better idea. Back in the 2015 package, the goal was to see if we could build 50-year roads. Turns out we can. It takes some maintenance along the way. So the brown graph, or the brown line, you can see is just a typical road if you leave it alone. It'll last 20 years. Now, if we do some capital preventative maintenance on it, we can extend that life period to last 50 years. Again, we are investing a lot of money right now into our highway system. We do not have the resources to maintain that. You're all familiar with the Growing Michigan Together Council. These two graphs were in my previous slides, but I think it was good to show that they were part of this, this council's report. It identified that there's a $3.9 billion annual funding gap in our transportation network. It recognizes that the problem gets worse the longer you wait, and that is shown through every report that's been done on this issue. Every year, the number grows more. And it expressed the need to transfer away from a gas tax funded system and examine alternative dedicated funding sources to maintain Michigan's roads infrastructure, including vehicle miles traveled fees and tolling. And so on vehicle miles traveled fees or road usage charges, I want to give you guys an idea of what the rest of the country is doing. And we've got 18 or so states that have a pilot program or an introduction to a pilot program. And you've got 4 states that have implemented a program that are all voluntary, but will be mandatory at some point. I believe, MITA believes that we're a little behind in this area, and we think that we should be studying what a road usage charge in Michigan would look like for all passenger vehicles. I know there's a debate between whether it should be electric, whether it should be all vehicles. We believe the most equitable way is to get it on all vehicles. And there are a plethora of ways you can collect mileage data from individuals. We've gone from fix the damn roads to fund the damn roads. And I wanted to list a few things that things can be done and what they raise. Each penny that you raise for the gas tax raises $53 million annually. Each 10% that you increase the registration fees, you raise $144 million annually. You can implement a road usage charge or a vehicle miles traveled fee. Each penny per mile raises about $968 million. We believe that toll roads should be a conversation in our road funding debate. And the feasibility study done by HNTB shows that we could raise $1.3 billion annually in toll roads. And again, the biggest public policy problem in our issue is the sales tax on fuel. We believe you can remove the sales tax on motor fuel, increase the gas tax by an equivalent amount, making it revenue neutral at the pump, and raise $1.1 billion annually for roads. What you could do, so we always get in between coming up with a plan or not coming up with a plan. My plan is to get 56 votes out of your chamber. So whatever is feasible for lawmakers. But what you could do, you could raise the gas tax by 25 cents and raise $1.325 billion annually. You sunset that gas tax, as I think we all recognize that the more fuel-efficient vehicles that are on the road, the more electric vehicles that are on the road, the less gas tax revenues we are collecting. And a more equitable way is a road usage charge. Sunset the gas tax completely and replace it with a revenue-neutral road usage charge by 2035. Implement a 550-mile toll system that could raise $1.3 billion. Our idea of eliminating the sales tax and increasing the gas tax by the equivalent amount raises of $1.1 billion. And we threw in just an example of registration fees for $576 million at 40%. And we also believe that to make everything equitable, you would have to increase the electric and hybrid vehicle registration fees to reflect the increases in the user fees for typical ICE vehicles. Again, also expiring in 2035 with the road usage charge implementation. So you could raise $4.3 billion annually, approximately total revenue. Easy peasy. We did, back on my sales tax on motor fuel question, we did do a poll just recently that was released yesterday of 600 active and likely voters from February 13th to 18th, and 82% of the respondents said that they believe that all taxes that are paid at the pump should go into roads and bridges. When pressed on the question and given the information on where that revenue currently goes, 66% still support legislation that requires all $1.1 billion generated at the pump to go towards roads and bridges. So we thought that's good information for you guys to have. When I testified in House Tax Policy or House Transportation Policy Committee, I think a lot of people were surprised by what gas taxes in the surrounding states are and what other avenues they have. So we put this graph together to show you what the gas taxes are in the other states. As you can see, we're the second lowest in our surrounding states. And then 4 of those 7 states actually allow for toll roads, It's a good comparison state by state on what we're doing in Michigan, and we always get, why are Ohio roads so much better than our roads? And Ohio is a really good example. When I got to MITA in 2011, Ohio was spending $1 billion more annually in their roads, and their road network is very similar to Michigan. Since then, they've increased their gas tax by 10 cents, so they're spending even more than we are. And so I think it's pretty obvious why their roads are in better shape than ours. HNTB put together a really good list of what other states are doing a little bit beyond what the user fee model is. There's a registration surcharge for high mile per gallon vehicles in Virginia that our counterparts on the federal level say is going very well. Any vehicle that's over 25 miles per gallon would have a surcharge. A resident advantage fuel tax increase, which individuals can get their rebates based at their fuel tax. It'll collect out of state, and I think it assumes that not everyone's going to go after that rebate. You can't, but sales tax or general funds for transportation has been used in other states. Major tolling projects that we've seen in other states, Indiana and Kentucky. Unique that a couple of states are doing a retail delivery fee, and Colorado and Minnesota have implemented those with some exceptions and some boundaries on when that actually goes into play. And then a lot of states are doing road usage charges. They also put together some alternatives for Michigan to do. A vehicle registration surcharge on high mile per gallon vehicles, like Virginia does, could raise $70 million a year. A resident advantage fuel tax increase could raise $250 million plus a year, assuming that the state would raise the gas tax by 10 cents and then allow residents to get a rebate. Sales tax on general funds or general funds. For us, I would love if you guys could put a sales tax into place to increase 1 penny or 2 pennies for roads, but unfortunately that's got to go to the voters, and that's a pretty difficult and heavy lift. Major tolling projects, as I mentioned before, we believe that it should be a consideration when we talk about a long-term sustainable road funding solution. As you can see of the little graph where those proposed tolls would be. Retail delivery fees could raise $195 to $200 million, assuming a quarter per parcel delivery fee for transportation. And then again, road usage charge. We are highly advocating for the state to look into a pilot program and test the individuals in our state on a road usage charge and get their responses from it. I think that we've seen in other states that obviously at first there's hesitation. Anytime change is implemented, there's hesitation. But we have also seen that by the end of it, it's not as bad as a thing as people thought it was. It's pretty simple, and they don't mind it. And so we think we should get that ball rolling in this state. And I think we talked a lot about revenue, but I also think that it's important to talk about any cost-saving measures that we can. And we believe at MITA that your biggest cost-saving measure that you could do is increase access to aggregates in this state. We have had a huge demand in our aggregate supply, and we are running out of our pits that are open. We are running into a lot of roadblocks on local units of government denying those pits. And so here are just a few examples of headlines in different areas where pits have been denied or held up in courts. And at the bottom line, we just need better access to our aggregates. The result right now is taxpayers and private sector are paying more per mile because of trucking costs and those aggregate pits being so far away from the construction project. And we have some examples of 120, 130 miles of aggregate being delivered that far away. And that the biggest increase, one of the largest increases in inflation costs are our trucking costs right now. You think about it, fuel and maintenance on vehicles, truckers are in very high demand, and so we can cut that very down. We can cut that significantly down and cut some costs. Lastly, we've got an ongoing educational campaign called the Fix My State. It's got more information than you could ever imagine, and I encourage you all, if you want more information, I'm happy to provide it to you, but also encourage you to go to fixmystate.org. and see some of that stuff that we're going. We're starting to get more public engagement on the debate, and hopefully we'll be flooding your offices to your demise and dismay. But I think that's what's important, is educating the public, making sure that they understand that there's a real need here. The more we wait, the worse it gets. And I think I heard the director say it the other day. If we're okay with the roads that we have right now, then we can do nothing and keep them going that way. But I don't think most of Michiganders are okay with the roads that they are right now. So that's all I got.
Lance, thank you so much for that presentation. A lot of insightful information that we went through. I think, unfortunately, I'm maybe really obsessed with this more so than the average person around town. So I find this stuff it's really insightful in that way. I appreciate kind of MITA's role in this puzzle, and so I am kind of that chart that you laid out that we had seen a while back that lays out the different scenarios. I think that's just a really telling picture of how dire the situation is. If you look at those lines, the line of us not doing anything kind of just falls off a cliff. And I think the takeaway of understanding that the longer we wait, just the more expensive this conversation becomes, and the need to kind of find a solution sooner than later, again, is dire. With that, as we're kind of exploring conversations, we want to make sure that the solution that we do come up with is future-proof. I don't think anyone has a magic 8-ball of knowing kind of what this transition to kind of electric vehicles and just the broader transportation conversation is going to look like long-term. And so, whatever we do, we want to see. And so just with that, I think you even briefly touched on it. There's kind of two ways to tackle this problem. One's on the revenue side, and one's on kind of the cost side. If we kind of narrow in for a minute on the revenue side, thank you for laying out that buffet of options that's available. I think, unfortunately, not one solution in itself can take care of the entirety of the problem. The road usage charge is something that I've taken a liking to, and I'm kind of exploring. Can you speak a little bit to just around the country, has any state kind of implemented this in full? And I know in just some of my conversations, there is some fears of what that would mean with the access to data that would have to be shared by drivers. And Can you kind of talk down some of those concerns?
Yeah, for sure. So Oregon, Utah, Virginia, and Hawaii have implemented a full program. Again, it's voluntary. In Hawaii, it's mandatory for all vehicles in 2033. But I will admit it's been slow. The nice thing that we can see is that we can take a lot of the positive and negatives that have happened across the country and utilize it. And I think studying it will allow us to do that. But for us, it's the most equitable way to collect a user fee. We're very disappointed that the federal government hasn't come up with their own strategy on this, because eventually you're going to want to collect user fees from Illinois, Chicago, from other states. And how do you do that, or how does a traveler out in a different state, collect that user? How does Michigan collect the user fee from them, or vice versa? How do they get out of paying that user fee if 20,000 miles were driven in Ohio? And so there are a lot of things, again, why we think we need to study it a little bit further.
I agree. I'm hoping that some of these issues can be solved at the federal level. I think a national vehicle miles travel model would be the ideal solution, but I like it particularly for Michigan just because of the reasons of in a future state when you're robust with the setup of it, it can be kind of dynamic and you can change things and you can capture a lot of out-of-state revenue in the summers when people are going up north, and so I think there's a lot of great there. And then just also briefly on the cost side of the conversation, you did mention kind of access to aggregates. Do you have any sort of metric in terms of if we were to be able to source our aggregates closer and save costs that way, what that number looks like, how sizable of a piece of the equation that is?
Sure, I do not. I know that our coalition, I think it's Build Michigan Strong, is putting that information together. It's very difficult information to get. You know, our members are very close with their bids and what goes into those bids for proprietary reasons. They don't want their peers and their competitors seeing where, you know, where their labor costs are or where their equipment costs are. So certainly we're attempting to get that information from some of our members. And I know Doug Needham at the Michigan Aggregate Association is doing the same. So hopefully we'll have some sort of monetary number for you that will give you some sort of savings. But we know it's significant just based off the anecdotal evidence that we have. You know, a job in Ann Arbor getting aggregate from Jackson doesn't seem like a long way. It's increasing cost significantly when there's a pit close to Ann Arbor in Washtenaw County that could be opened.
Thank you. I look forward to kind of when those numbers start becoming a little bit more available, just digging into those. But again, just overall, you know, there's a lot that we need to do. There's, I think your estimates were about 3.9 billion, and so do want to close that gap. I do want to open it up to my colleagues for questions. Do we have questions? Surprise. Start with Rep. Steele.
There's just a lot of information. So this particular chart, do you know if the surrounding states charge, if they were able to get the sales tax back into the roads that they charge on the gas?
Yes, so Indiana and Illinois are in the process of doing that right now. Indiana is a little convoluted. It's like, you know, there's a certain percentage by this year and then another percentage, but they are both transitioning their sales tax on fuel into their road and bridges program.
And then do you know, like administratively wise, like for every dollar, I think only 50 cents goes to our actual roads based on it gets funneled in other spots. Do you know how other states are with, you know, how much money actually goes into the road versus administration and other items?
Sure, I do not.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Rep. Morgan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this presentation. I think it very effectively lays out that we really do have a transportation and infrastructure funding crisis. I was always taught that we aim for A's, we can get by with B's, but C's are unacceptable. And what I see in what you presented is a heck of a lot worse than C's. So I would like to see us do a whole lot better. I think we have made significant improvements to catching up in recent years. I think the governor has very effectively focused public attention on the roads, and I think that's been really important and positive. With that said, I think as you've laid out, we really are failing the people of our state when it comes to investing in our road infrastructure. I think we should be expressing truly bipartisan outrage at the fact that we don't have a long-term solution and collaborating to come up with an effective funding solution long-term. These are really hard discussions when it comes to ensuring we have the revenue to provide the infrastructure that the people need. But I believe we can do that if we are willing to have those tough conversations. I'd like to see, based on what you presented, I'd like to see us identify new revenue, better utilize some of our existing resources, and properly direct all of our current funding sources for roads and infrastructure to roads and infrastructure. We emphasize that we fund transportation, both roads and public transit, with transportation-related taxes and dollars. But we have a lot of revenue sources that are going to the general fund or other places that are not going to transportation. And so it frustrates me that we are only looking at how we pull more dollars from that space, which we do need to do, while we're not properly directing what we have now. So I would like to see us, in the overall budget, properly direct the resources paid for by transportation-related revenue to transportation and infrastructure. So I think you've laid out a lot of phenomenal ideas that are worth considering, and I think I agree with the chair that we really would need to look at a combination of those ideas to ensure the resources available. Right. The last point I will make is thank you for pointing out that this is just looking at state roads. We have to help our locals with the local roads. We have to. It doesn't matter if you can drive smoothly on the highway if you've gotten a flat tire or broken your axle on your way to the highway. So I would like to see us also pay attention to that piece as well. That is not a question, it is all commentary, but thank you very much, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Morgan. I appreciated your riddle on the report card. I'm the son of immigrants, so for us it was you aim for A's or don't come home. But regardless, what kind of struck me is what you said is this is one of those conversations that can be bipartisan. There doesn't need to be that partisan slant that exists, in the ethos of Lansing that in this room. I think this is a conversation that affects Michiganders regardless of political persuasion. And so that's what attracts me to this conversation. That's why I think it's so important we figure this out. But with that, Lance, thanks for your time today.
If I could make one more
yeah.
comment on that last remark. The 2015 road funding package that passed was under complete Republican control. So you're absolutely correct. This is a bipartisan issue.
Good. Let's keep it that way. With that, again, thanks, Lance. Thank you for that. With that, we'll be moving on to testimony from MDOT, the Michigan Department of Transportation, who will be speaking on some of these funding mechanisms that were brought up here and also just providing some information on what the department is currently working with in relation to these tools. Gentlemen, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. I'll get started while he's working on the PowerPoint presentation. I'm Patrick McCarthy. I'm the Bureau Director for Finance and Administration for the department. The first thing that we wanted to discuss was the 2023 appropriation requirement in our budget bill that we do a study of the impact of electrical vehicles on our transportation revenues. We did a literature review of nationwide efforts and prior studies and publications regarding electric vehicles and solutions to replacing the fact that we're moving away from ICE vehicles, internal combustion engines, towards electric vehicles. As Lance mentioned in his presentation, and we've got some statistics, I think 37 states now have done pilots or studies of road user charges. And then the 4 states that have already started to do like full-blown pilots or transitions away from pilots and into permanent solutions. We also did work with the Department of Treasury on an analysis of the revenue impact for electric vehicles. And as a result of the 2015 revenue package that added a surcharge to electric vehicles on your registration, the conclusion really was that electric vehicles are not reducing the amount of revenue that we are not collecting at the pump by having an electric vehicle. So that was a good result of that 2015 revenue package. But what wasn't really analyzed, but it is kind of common knowledge across the industry, is that really the big impact is the fuel efficiency of our ICE vehicles increasing. That's where we're seeing the loss of purchasing power and loss of revenue on fuel taxes. So a transition to a new solution away from fuel tax collections, be it RUCs, tolls, whatever, is critical to the long-term sustainability of transportation funding. Just a few conclusions about that 2023 literature review that we did. Again, the 37 states have done some sort of research on the topic. Those 4 states have done permanent RUC programs. And again, the cost of collecting the mileage-based fees is really unknown. It depends really on what solution that you use to replace fuel tax collections and registration fees. In the 2024 appropriation budget that we're currently operating under, the department was required to pursue a federal pilot for road user charges. Unfortunately, at this point, Federal Highway has not issued yet the notice of funding opportunity, which is the first step in that process, before we can put together our grant application and send a request to Federal Highway to be approved for a pilot. That's expected to come out in April of this year. We've already started conversations with the consultant industry as well as with the Department of Treasury and the Department of State on what a road user charge pilot would look like and what type of solutions we might try to pilot in the state of Michigan. There's also interest from other states like Wisconsin to do regional pilots with this funding, because this solution is going to be bigger than Michigan. We have to be able to deal with interstate revenue collections and mileage reporting. So again, we've got that, we're ready to submit a grant application once Federal Highway opens up the opportunity to do that. We did want to kind of give you a little bit of set some expectations on, oh, I'm sorry. We moved our slides around. This is actually slide 10 and 11, I think it is. Actually 12 and 13, sorry. We wanted to just kind of mention the timeline of this pilot that we're planning to pursue. The notice of funding opportunity we expect to happen this April. There's about a 60-day response window to submit our application. Then the federal government has about 8 to 16 months to do reviews and announce the accepted grant proposals. After that will be a short period of 3 to 5 months with Federal Highway on getting the award processed. And then we will work on procuring a consultant to help us with the pilot, selection of the team and that development of the team, including other state agencies, legislative sponsors for the pilot. And then after we have the pilot in place, we expect it to take about 6 to 12 months for the discovery of what the pilot will look like and proposed ideas. Setting up the pilot will take another 6 to 12 months. And then completing the pilot, evaluating the results will take another 3 to 12 months. So just wanted to give you an idea that, you know, while we are working to pursue this, this is not something that we're probably going to see a report that can be prepared and delivered to the legislature as quickly as I think everybody would like to see that. So I think I can.
Do you have time, Mr. Chair, to continue on with our presentation? Or?
We do. We have a hard stop in about 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Gene, you wanna come up? Next, we have Jean Russman. Jean is our administrator of our Office of Passenger Transportation, and she's going to talk about a federal grant that her office pursued and a project that they're currently working on with road user charges.
And I'm going to try and speak fast, but not so fast you can't understand me, because I want Carrie to have time for hers. So this was a study we actually applied for in the fall of '21. And 16 months later, got notification that we had been successful, at which time we had to remind ourselves what we'd even asked for. And luckily, it was still relevant of what we wanted to understand about road use charging, but our perspective on it was more about how it would impact people's modal choice. So that was really the focus of our study, but we're learning a lot of good information in it. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide. So there's really two different phases to the study that we're doing. And right now we've launched phase 1, which was a statewide survey. And that was asking people, first of all, do they understand what a road use charge is? And how do they feel about it? Do they think it's fair? Do they think it's the right thing to do? And also then to ask if they would be interested in being involved in phase 2. So our phase 2 project is getting more into that modal choice. And that is, we're going to be using a simple kind of mobility wallet type tool that will ask people to enter where it is they plan to go. It'll give them information about the cost of that trip, whether they take a personal vehicle, public transit, if they go at maybe off-peak times or take less congested roads, and then see what their choices are. Does that knowledge make a difference in their choice? If they choose more public transit, that gives me an understanding that we need, I already know we need more public transit funding, but even more than that if people are going to really start making that shift. So you can go ahead to this next slide. So the project timeline, we are in the survey timeline that shows to the end of March. We are actually going to, our plan right now is to end that survey on March 8th because we have had overwhelming response. So we have actually exceeded what we thought we would do in that. And you'll see that we will be analyzing that, the results from that survey, and should have a report in May. But then we'll go into phase 2. So the final project report will not be until May of '25, but we should have some really good data on people's attitudes and perceptions in May. So you can go ahead to the next. And just to give you an overview of like who are the respondents, as you'll see, we were shocked. So far, we've received almost 44,000 responses. However, we are doing very careful vetting of those responses. So we have what we call total validated responses of almost 19,000. That was as of February 26th. We did offer a $10 incentive for the first, well, up to 12,000. We didn't take it that far because for various reasons. But that was all federal money, just to make it clear. The federal money was used for that incentive, and FHWA approved that. But because of that, we had a decent amount of bot activity and fake responses. However, bots didn't have a chance to get too intelligent on it because in 2 days' time, we had already hit the goal for how many gift cards we planned to give out. And we stopped giving out those gift cards. The good news is that people continue to take the survey. We got a lot of responses after they weren't getting an incentive. They simply wanted their voices heard. But we did take great care in looking for, duplicate surveys, people that what look like bots, people who didn't take long enough to answer, so you could tell they hadn't actually read the questions. They simply went through and marked a box. Because we want to make sure we're hearing from actual Michigan citizens. So that has been a great response on that. And the good thing also, from those 19,000 validated responses, we have interest in moving into phase 2 from a little over 10,000 addresses. 6.3 gave license plates. That helps us know if they have a vehicle that would make them viable for that second part, to know if they're, that they have to have an actual choice between a vehicle and another mode. So that's the great news. So that might help us actually expand the area that we're reaching out to for that. As you can see by this, we've had really good coverage across the state. Over 95% of the zip codes have been reached. We are a little shy on some of the demographics we wanted to reach. So we are extending it. We're going to close it on March 1st. We're going to keep it open for one more week and do some targeted outreach to community groups, neighborhood groups, to try and get that response rate, because right now we're a little heavy on wealthy, white, educated men. So we want to make sure we have a true representation of the state on that. So the next slide is a video, which we don't need to take time to watch, and it's probably not going to play, but if you want to go out to the survey, we're really proud of the video. It's an educational video that is shown halfway through the survey to see if when we educate people on road use charges, that their answers might be impacted with more knowledge. So that was very quick, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. We'll kind of be quick here to be mindful of time. Just 2 very quick questions. Do we need to wait for federal funding in order to do a pilot?
For the other study, I think this study doesn't go as far as you might want that other study to go to. And I know I don't have the money in my budget to take it to that next level. There's a chance we could.
How much would that be?
Have you guys estimated all? I honestly have no idea.
Okay.
Well, we could try and come up with a number and put it to you, because I do think this study could lead into the next study. It
Sure.
gives us that first round of information that would feed in well to the next phase of of a study that would look even deeper.
Okay, great. Again, being mindful of time, we'll ask my colleagues to just take questions offline, and we'll move on to the next piece of the presentation.
Mr. Chairman and committee, next we have Carrie Martin from our Bureau of Transportation Planning. And Carrie was the project manager, the lead project manager on the legislatively initiated tolling study. So Carrie's going to give a brief overview of the tolling study, and then it's my understanding that next week HNTB will be in, to which was the consultant that actually performed this study on behalf of the department and the legislature, and will give a much more in-depth presentation.
Thanks, Troy. So the Michigan tolling study was initiated in response to legislation enacted in 2020, as Troy mentioned. You can go to the next, all limited access highways in Michigan, which is about 1,922 miles of the state's 31 limited access highways, were studied and considered for tolling as a part of the feasibility analysis. Skip over. Based on that analysis, an 1,156-mile toll system emerged for an all-electronic tolling network using traffic volumes and also revenue generation. The implementation plan was set to focus on a Tier 1 list of projects. We looked at several tiers since we knew that we couldn't build a 1,156-mile system all at one time. So we looked at the first tier of projects that were easily deployed. So financial performance, road and bridge condition, and geographic equity were all considered for the first tier of implementation. So you can go to that. Yep, so this was the first tier. There were 545 miles in the Tier 1 corridors that were the focus of the implementation plan analysis. The gross revenue of the entire Tier 1 system is $1.3 billion in the year of collection, as Lance had mentioned. We looked at using the federal bridge tolling program and also a pilot program called the Value Pricing Pilot Program through the federal government. And those were the assumed tolling programs to implement this first tier. Go to the next one. So what were the findings? Is tolling a financially feasible option to generate revenue? The answer is yes. However, with all things related to funding, it's never just a yes or no answer. There are other aspects of feasibility that were looked at through the implementation plan, including community and diversion impacts, equity, and legislative and public acceptance. And the implementation plan got to some of that, those aspects of feasibility. After detailed analysis, the 1,156-mile toll system emerged with the first tier of 545 miles that could support an initial $8.5 billion capital investment at a toll rate of 6 to 6.5 cents per mile for passenger cars and 4 times that, or 24 cents for commercial vehicles. The initial construction would be staggered over a 6-year period. The first key assumption to implementing a toll network is to assume that we would toll bond finance to support the initial capital program. This allows all roads and bridges to be improved to meet or exceed their performance standards before the start of tolling would begin. No one wants to pay for the ride on the same road without a level of benefit. Toll bond financing would also support some operational improvements and the initial installation of the full tolling system. A toll network would also include enhanced crash clearing, winter maintenance, and corridor operations to add benefit. As we've been kind of talking about, tolling could be a diversified revenue source and free up existing regular program funds for investment in other road and bridge projects by removing the need to invest regular program funds in some of the department's most expensive assets, which are our limited access highways. So as mentioned, tolling is not the total answer, but if implemented, could be a part of a more diversified solution. I'm going to kind of end there. That's just kind of some background information, the last couple slides. I've also left a handout for you in advance of the HNTB presentation that's going to be given next week. Might help you generate some questions.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being mindful of your time and keeping it a little bit
Talk fast.
quick here. Yeah, I think have to be done here in a couple minutes, and so we're gonna unfortunately just ask members to keep questions offline. Again, with the committee, these are just important conversations for the budget, and so we plan to use the next couple of weeks to dive even further into some of these ideas specifically. We do plan on meeting again next week, March 6th, and so with that, we'll be wrapping up for the day. Representative Skaggs moves to excuse absent members. Without objection, it is so ordered. With no further business, the committee will stand adjourned. Thank you.